Herald Now this morning had Chewie on. This was a pretty good little chat for Chewie, actually. They were talking about tertiary institutions and the scrapping of Te Pūkenga, because Chewie kind of lays out, it does feel a bit like, what did the government cancel, Chewie, that had just, it was the EV subsidy. It had just gotten into actually profit mode. Like it had been running at a loss and it had just got into profit mode. And that's when so in other words, it could have been zero. It could have cost the government literally nothing. It was profiting. And they scrapped it because, farmers, utes, yada, yada, yada. And Chewie kind of does that here with Te Pūkenga, because the system they set up had just started to deliver a surplus. And then this government cancelled it. Let's have a listen to the full story.
Was the previous government's big mega merger of polytechs has now been unpicked by the current government, and they are re-establishing 10 regional polytechs in their place. This was announced at Postcab yesterday. Now, on News Talk ZB Drive last night, I was...
sorry to interrupt. You got to say, if you believe that this wasn't working as a system last time, like that some of the smaller institutions were failing, right? And this is the case that Chippy's going to put forward. If you were, I'd like to know from Mr. Luxon, do you accept that the old system wasn't working and some of the small institutes were starting to fail? If he says yes, then it's like, why are we going back to it to do exactly what we were doing that is failing? Now, if you say no, then I think that's a measurable statement, because there are numbers, etc., etc., etc. Here we go.
I was joined by Penny Simmons, who's the Minister for Vocational Education, and I asked her just about the costs of this.
Pretty much wasted, yes, because there's nothing to see for it. They didn't do the work getting the financial pathways. They didn't do the work in selling off assets that aren't needed. There's over $100 million worth of assets that aren't needed that will be sold off over the next couple of years. That's part of that finance.
That's an important point to remember, because Shippy comes back to it. They're talking about selling off assets in these tertiary institutions to help pay for the tertiary institutions. Right, I just don't want us to skip past that, because Chippy comes back to it and I want to make sure we've got it. So Penny Simmons is saying we've got all these things we can sell that'll support these tertiary institutions. Why haven't they done that? Just store it for the conversation.
Financial viability pathway. You shouldn't have more assets than you need to have.
Penny Simmons claimed that the previous minister, which is Chris Hipkins, was responsible, because he set up and was the minister while they implemented Te Pūkenga, responsible for wasting $300 million on the experiment, which is now basically over. Chris Hipkins is the Labour leader and he's with me now. Chris, good morning.
Wow. Good morning.
Is that outrageous from Penny Simmons?
Well, I think Penny Simmons' answer there, which suggests that the way to make politics viable is to have them selling off their assets, is somewhat short-sighted. In a place like Northland, she singled out Northland yesterday, where they have a big campus there in Northland. Once they've sold off all of the land that they currently have, how is Northland going to have a polytech in the future if they don't have any land left and they're not financially viable? There are similar debates in places like Taranaki and the West Coast as well. Small regional polytechs will potentially disappear under this new model that the government have gone back to. Effectively, it's back to the future. They're going back to a model that was already failing.
But weren't they already disappearing? Which is why when you did.
Yes, they were disappearing. Hence the need for a change, not a way to go back and get them to start disappearing again. You're so close, Ryan.
Model that was already failing.
But weren't they already disappearing? Which is why when you did the mega thing.
Well, that's exactly the point. We didn't want them to keep disappearing. So putting them together meant that the smaller polytechs could leverage off the strength of the bigger ones, and the system as a whole would be more viable. The great irony here is last year, for the first time, Te Pukenga actually turned a surplus. So things were starting to get there. Now, I'm the first to admit it was far too slow. Those first few years that Te Pukenga was in existence, I don't think they made enough progress towards achieving the gains that we wanted from the polytech system. But the irony is, just as they were starting to achieve those things, the whole thing's been turned upside down again. And it's right at the time when we desperately need more training. You know, we've got a higher unemployment rate, we've got people needing to reskill for new jobs, and the government's turning the system upside down.
Did you guys spend $300 million setting it up? I mean, is she right in saying that because they have now turned it around or demerged it, that it's $300 million wasted?
Well, a big part of that was writing off debts from the last system. So the previous...
Okay, so remember that. So they've written off debts that the institutions had. Under this system, those debts have still been written off.
Polytechs were all clocking up debts, not all of them, some of them were clocking up quite significant debts. We had to write off a chunk of that money. We had to put money into things that just hadn't been invested in, like all their IT systems were run down.
So these institutions have new IT systems. So this $300 million is not just about plans and then throwing out the window. Even though that the new government, the current government, has cancelled a bunch of stuff that's going to mean the spend is not going to be recuperated, there are tangible things in there as well. They wrote off debt. They did new IT systems.
So, you know, enrolment systems. They need to be able to, if you want students to be studying or training, you need to be able to enrol them, and their enrolment systems were run down. So
it's
a lot
not
of money
wasted.
needed to be invested to...
Not wasted money.
Well, it's wasted. It's wasted if the government choose to scrap everything that they had invested in. But those are choices that the current government are making, not the previous government. If they choose to, you know, if a house is 3/4 built and you say we're not going to complete it, we're going to demolish it instead, who wasted the money? The people who built 3/4 of the house or the people who demolished it?
There you go, Chewie.
Great answer.
And very to the point as well. There you go, Chewie. I've had a bit of a say through that. Why don't you jump in? Any thoughts? Sir?
Yeah, look, when we're in a position of having people struggling to find jobs and hemorrhaging tradies and all of these factors that, again, the current government has turbocharged, the fact that they just blew up this program to centralise another form of tertiary learning throughout the country is just dooming the regions all over again. So if Northland Polytech is not viable, but it would have been if it was put in the pot with all of the other bigger, more successful ones. We've removed that form of education from Northland if it collapses, from the West Coast, from South Canterbury. You know, there were polytechs that were doing very well. You know, like the Southern Institute of Technology was not a big fan of this. You know, they were doing well and have always done very well out of their zero fee scheme that actually did what I would consider the impossible task of attracting people to go to Invercargill. Like, but it worked.
4 years in purgatory, but you get a degree with no debt.
And I understand why they pushed back against that so hard, because they were like, but we're doing fine, but other places weren't. And again, this it absolutely sounds almost mirror perfect to the arguments to Three Waters, right? The regions that were doing well didn't want to participate, and the regions that weren't doing well were fucked, and no one was coming to save them. And that's what we've got with the polytechs as well. But I think this aspect that we have people, if you can't find job, then the next best thing is to get into educational training, right? And that's what the government said. We want the youth in work or in training. Do we have any work for them? Absolutely not. Do we have a place for them to train? Also, no.
No. Are we going to continue the very successful plan of giving them their first year free? No, we're going to make it their last year. Now, like on some surface level, you kind of go, oh well, that rewards people for staying there through their whole education. But what it doesn't do is get people through the door, which when it's high unemployment, that's a very good choice for some young people to do. Go and get the first year paid for, go and study, and then see what it can lead to, rather than we only want to help the guys that stay focused, stay on, and stay all the way through. I guess that's the difference between the left and the right, though, isn't it? We want to reward the succeeders rather than help the people struggling.
Yeah. The other things that I want to comment out of this interview is Chippy did very well there. I think
that's
there were
great.
some really, really solid answers, and I think that's just a side effect of the fact that that was his portfolio. I think he knew it very, very well. The other thing is, I still haven't decided, is Ryan Bridges? Bridge or Bridges?
Bridge, I think.
Just the one, just the singular bridge. Okay, I'll remember that. Is he
Single lane.
our dumbest interviewer? Just like zero subtlety, zero comprehension, just like that setup that he gave for Chippy coming in was egregious.
Yo, weren't they
Like
already failing? Were they already disappearing?
Look, I don't want to knock the guy too hard. He has fantastic hair.
Oh, great.
But
hair.
was that the only thing that was on his job application? Was a headshot? Because the man is dense.
Or and location, because I don't know how NZME set up these days. When I used to work for them, ZB was on the top floor. So I was going to say, because he's on the 4th floor between 5 and 6, and then he comes down to the 3rd floor for 7 till 10. So that's his location's also a part of it.
Funnily enough, that's how I got my first job in broadcasting. I was studying broadcasting at Aoraki Polytechnic down here in Dunedin, and Radio Works was the floor below. So, you get in the lift at the end of the day and you can find a job.